All right, welcome to our service dog handler chat for November with our topic of noticing needs. And so we have a special guest that I've been excited to have. I'm excited about all my special guests, but I I joined the Grisha Stewart Academy roughly about 8 months ago, and I'm telling you, it was the best thing I could have done. Like, I have dog trainer friends all over the world previous to joining, but it's just mind blown at everything I listen to. So I want to thank you for the Academy for one, and the Diamond membership,
Thanks, Penny.
but also,
Yeah, that was amazing. I love hearing that. Thank you.
well, and not that maybe you don't want this all over the place, but the way that I got into the Academy to start with is that Grisha is very generous in, if you honestly can't afford it, you can get a free trial so that you can see if it's working for you. And that's where I started. And now I'm definitely paying for it, but it's like it's one of my top priorities to pay for because of that free trial. And now I know the value that I'm getting. And there is so much content there that, like, 5 years from now, I probably still won't be all the way through it.
It's a lot. And basically, it's all the things I'm curious about. And so it ends
Yeah.
up rippling through yeah,
Yes.
lots of things. And yeah, and we do. So we have a scholarship program. If you go to the website under values, so go to grishastewart.com and then values, it'll kind of describe some of our programs, and the scholarships are one of them. So
All right. So I do
Penny,
horrible at, just a minute, Cindy. I know you're going to have something and I'll let you get it out. Just going to say that I do horrible about introductions. I butcher them, and I hate long introductions. And so those are the people that have been here before. No, I'm going to quickly say, this is Grisha Stewart. You can introduce yourselves, or she can introduce herself. Just remember, stay muted unless we ask you to unmute, just because that prevents flashing in the replay, and that can cause seizures from some of our disabled handlers. So stay muted unless we call upon you. I'm going to take Cindy's one question that she had, and I put her on hold for a moment, and then we'll go right to Grisha and let you kind of introduce yourself, and we'll go from there. Go ahead, Cindy.
this was just a little bit of housekeeping. I'm monitoring chats, so if you have any questions or comments that you want to make, feel free to just put it in chat, and then Penny or I will pull it up. And if you do have a question, you can always raise your hand, or if you can go down to reactions and you click on the little happy face, and it will say raise your. It gives you the option of raising your hand. And so you can, and it just says raise hand, and you just click that and your hand goes up and you move to the front. So that's the little housekeeping. And that will, so then we also know to check chat at the same time.
We will also take note of it too, because if it's something that we're like still talking about at the moment and we can address it easily with where we're at, we'll address it then. If it's something like, because by the time we get questions typed out, sometimes we've moved past it. And if that's the case, we will address it at the end. So if we don't get to it right away, don't panic, we'll get to it. But just know that we want to try to make sure that we can get everything accomplished within the hour that we have to do this chat. And then we have 30 minutes for questions and answers afterwards as well. So with that, Grisha, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit more?
sure. So yes, my name is Grisha Stewart, and I'm an author, a dog trainer, also a musician, and I do lots of other things. That dancer. I enjoy my life a lot, and I have an online school, as Penny mentioned already. That's pretty eclectic and covers all kinds of aspects of life with dogs, but particularly behavior focused and also care for humans. So we have a class called How to Human that I particularly appreciate. And yeah, I developed BAT, behavior adjustment training. So if you have dogs with reactivity, and you might have heard of that already, that's a technique that I came up with in 2009. And then I've recently, it became BAT 2.0 and it has recently become BAT 3.0 with a new variation. So that's me, Penny. And I have 2 dogs and a husband who's making me tea. And I am currently in Chicago visiting some relatives for Thanksgiving.
Are you still gonna be there this weekend or like Thursday, Friday, Saturday?
We leave Saturday. Yep.
Because I'll be on the outskirts of Chicago Wednesday night.
Oh, nice.
My family is down there.
Nice. Like which part like
They are west, so they are barely just short of Wisconsin, but they're halfway between Chicago and Rockford on a nice little farm.
Mhm. Yeah, so yeah, we're in the far other side, like we're in the northeast side. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Totally
yeah,
opposite side.
right.
Used to drive around the bottom of Chicago when I lived in a different spot in Michigan. Now I just go down through Wisconsin.
Nice.
But
Yeah.
yeah, super familiar with that area. If you needed to get out of the city for a little while, I could make that happen.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah, no, we just got here. So I'm just happy to be where it is I am right now on the map. Yay, T.
My son-in-law's farm is one of the few in the state of Illinois that actually has live reindeer.
That's
Yeah,
exciting.
they
Have
have the whole
reindeer-
petting zoo stuff too.
reindeer
Yeah.
Have you done any reindeer training?
I specifically have not. I have several children that work for my son-in-law, and they do it a lot. We took our Christmas pictures last year with reindeer.
That would
So-
be an excellent sort of Christmas series, right? To be like, and that would sort of introduce people to positive reinforcement training. To be like, actually, Rudolph responds to clicker training, turns out.
Right, right. Well, and I do have my one son that works down there doing the clicker training style stuff. Like I don't use the physical clicker, but the same training style with marker words. He's doing that with the goats and the ponies and everything else now, which is new because that's not the way my son-in-law would have generally trained. But he's more on the management end of things now, and my son and daughter are doing more of the training aspect.
Nice.
So it's working really, really nicely for them. But so to kick us off, one of the things that I absolutely love in almost every Grisha Stewart episode of anything, and like she does monthly chats, and there's all the other pre-recorded stuff that's there too, but she always starts everything off with some type of grounding exercise. And so many of you may not be familiar with that. You may be familiar from other things. But so, Grisha, do you want to just start us off with one of your, I don't care which one, pick one, any one of your many grounding exercises that you walk people through?
Sure. So I think it's really important that we are embodied when we're learning or just when we're trying to go throughout our days. And so if you have any devices that are on that might be calling for your attention, like a little toddler, you can turn those devices off. And get yourself seated in the chair you are in or laying down on the surface that you're on and feel that you are physically held by this planet through the gravity. And I wanted to introduce a whole new one, Penny, that so I've never done this before. This is a device, a technology that I developed called the ripple spinner with my husband. And so basically it's super grounding. And so you may see it or you may not as I go throughout this meditation because your eyes will be closed. But so basically what I would like you to do first is just exhale all the air that you're holding in. And then inhale through your nose fully. You can keep your eyes open or closed. Inhale again. And exhale slowly through your mouth. We'll do that again one more time. In through your nose. In again. And exhale. With a big sigh. And since I didn't say you were sighing, let's do that one more time. In through your nose. In again. And exhale with a sigh. And let's go ahead and I invite you, you don't have to, but I invite you to close your eyes if you feel capable of doing so, and just allow your breathing to be natural. Putting some attention on the top of your body. So starting with the top of your head, allowing yourself to notice whatever your nerves are telling you. So it's kind of scanning through your body, not trying to fix anything or change anything. If it feels called to relax, it can. But just noticing where things feel pleasant or where they might feel a little bit of tension or pain. And just keeping scrolling down, saying hello to all of those parts of your physical body. Through your face, through your spine. And if you've already finished quickly, you can just start scanning again from the top, or you can go very slowly through your shoulders, your arms, your chest, your belly, and all of your viscera, the organs that help keep you alive. You can add some gratitude to all of these parts of you that keep the physical body moving. Down through your spine, in through your pelvis, a part of you that holds you up, through your hips, thighs, just allowing all of those parts of you to be felt or seen by the mind's eye. If any thoughts come in, you can just say thank you to those and focus again back onto the physical scan. So through your calves, ankles. If you're capable of wiggling your toes, wiggle your toes. Notice those being physically present. Any part of you that does have the capacity of movement, you can go ahead and just kind of move a little bit in your chair, wherever you are. Just a little wiggle. And then if you feel like it, you can shake off a little more with a little more emphasis. And then bring your attention to the sounds in the space around you. Any signs of life, maybe cars driving by or dogs moving in your space, your own breathing. And then again, feel the sensation of the chair or the bed or the surface below you. And open your eyes when you feel ready to do so. So much for being here. Thanks, Penny.
So thank you. Just real quickly, if you have the ability to hold it up high enough for people to see, I'm familiar with your I forget what you call it now. Yeah, your spinner.
I'm still working on coming up with the name, so I'm open to suggestions, but Ripple Spinner is what we're going with. And I did go so far as to make like ripplespinner.com. So I'm thinking it's going to be the name, but I think maybe Harmony Spinner. So I turned this on a lathe and it feels just super smooth. This particular one can go from the other side. My plan is actually that these will be a public creation that we're going to sort of crowdsource the funding to make them, but they will belong to everyone. And so basically we give them away and then they'll be passed along like person to person until lots of people throughout the world in different countries have experienced them. So that's the plan for those. So they'll never be for sale. These are sort of a disruptor to, or a check and balance to capitalism is kind of the plan. So,
I think they're really cool.
They go really fast, this particular one, because I put a lot of banking on it. So it's it's really nicely somatic because I think we also forget to be in our bodies a lot as in Western society particularly. And so it's a good reminder it's an alternative to being on the phone. Yeah. So, and that's mostly one of the main things I wanted sort of be here today to talk about is the body of the dog, and like what they need physically, what they need emotionally, what they need sort of mentally. I know that's Penny described that already, but and it's not like I have a big presentation. This is more of a Q&A, right? That's
Exactly. Yeah, it's a discussion.
for a part
Um,
of it, just like a quarter of a second, I was like, and I'm not prepared in case you need any of that.
no, more of a discussion in between, kind of going back and forth. And we wanted to kick it off with just a brief definition of what we mean by physical needs, mental needs, and emotional needs, which I'm sure most of us are well aware of, but just a generalized, maybe some types of each one, whatever works best for you to define them in the way that you would think most easily.
Sure. So one thing is, I think this is a really important subject for several different reasons. And one of them is that as we recognize that dogs are sentient beings just as we are, that there are so many different ways that we can support them. And then also it ends up working in this really kind of virtuous cycle that the more we care for the needs of the dogs and allow them to have those needs met and empower them to meet those needs, that we recognize that we also have those needs. And then people then become better at advocating for themselves as they learn to advocate for the dog. So it really is nice for all of us to pay attention to that, but also particularly service dog handlers can feel empowered to speak up for yourself a bit more because you've learned to speak up for the dog. So I don't know if that's been the case for anybody here. Is that, yeah. So answering the question, and then in terms of the definition, so mental, physical, emotional. So, mental needs are things like enrichment. So chances to sniff things, do the, things that are activities or behaviors that are that are species specific, that enrich the mental experience. So learning, training is part of that, but also a lot of just learning to opportunities to be curious are really important for the mental health of the dog. And then also and feel free, Penny, to jump in if you've got.
You're doing great.
Okay, cool. And then in terms of the physical needs, there's things like just obviously taking, vet care, but also a lot of veterinarians are not great at the full range of physical needs. So things like, T-touch, and there's other, like osteopaths and people that really notice the physical structure of the dog better. And so being able to have that. Rest is part of physical needs. Dogs need about 17 hours per day of rest, and they don't often get that. And especially if they're working dogs, so kind of making sure to be attuned to the dog's need for rest. And in our Western society, our human need for rest is very downgraded. And so we have coffee, we have all these different substances that are there to make it so we can make it through the day, when our physical soma is not really not prepared for that. Like, it's not what we evolved to do, is this sort of spinning wheel of, I'm going to go back to capitalism, that this is sort of spinning wheel that sort of makes us do more than we actually need to physically thrive. And so that, physical needs are that. And then things like making sure there's resting spaces in all of the spaces you are is an example. We'll get to that, but ways to make sure that we're attuned to what the dog, their own physical comfort. So in terms of like walking up hills or doing different things, observing them very carefully. And then, so that's physical needs. Exercise is a physical need. And then emotional needs would be things like making sure that they feel safe, that they feel like they belong, and that they've got a chance to experience their culture, dog culture. So they're able to be around other dogs, able to be around people to the extent that they want to, and that they have agency. So the capacity to ask for what they need or to be able to affect change so that they get those needs met would be an example of an emotional need that dogs have.
And often these mental, physical, emotional needs intertwine. And I have the perfect example of that happening around me right now. So I have my doggy for the day, Blue, that's here in the training center with me. He was supposed to be spending some alone time during this Zoom, but he was struggling. So I adjusted my computer so that I could be with him, but yet he could still kind of have alone time. So he's playing with a slow feeder ball that the treats fall out of. So he's getting some mental energy out. It's taking him all over the room. And up until this last moment where I started talking about him, Blue, come on, buddy. Blue, hey, he's a little bit close to his little at the moment. But up until I started talking about him, he was rolling this ball around and choosing to be in the room that he would have been shut in by himself had I done the things the way I wanted to. So he would have been totally alone in a closed in room where he had like all kinds of enrichment stuff in there, including the ball that he was playing with. But he brought the ball out here and played for a little while. And then he took it back in there and played for a little while. And he's been really great at just disengaging and doing his own thing because he was working through everything. I was close enough for him to see, taking care of that emotional aspect. The ball was meeting his need for food and entertainment, and just they were all interlapped so nicely and intertwined. So we do have to be careful with enrichment toys because they do not meet needs as well as we think that they're going to. In that particular situation, it was working really well, and it was his choice to play with that. He's had access to that ball all day long. He could have played with it anytime he wanted to. And now he just came and laid on his bed beside me. So it's a win-win when we make sure that they're taken care of. And so slight inconvenience for me because now I'm sitting in a hard chair versus my comfy couch. But his happiness is more important. Azul, relax. Azul's like, what about me? Because he can't see me anymore. And he knows this is usually his time to snuggle on the couch. So our next kind of thing was talking a little bit about some of the micro signs that our dogs give us, like Azul did this really low-key kind of whimper saying, hey, I need some time, which I'm going to go do as soon as Grisha starts talking again. But just so we know that our dogs give micro signs out, and most of us are aware of the major signs when our dog is having a meltdown, but I would like us all, including myself, to be more aware of those micro signs. So Grisha, want to talk a little bit about that?
Can do. And I would also love to open that up for discussion as well. So for each of your individual dogs, if you have micro signs that they express that we might not be mentioning, I think it'd be fun to sort of make it collaborative here.
And that's totally perfect because micro signs vary so drastically from dog to dog. So awesome.
So for example, and so are we talking about, sorry, Penny, before you go, micro signs for expressing which particular need, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter to me. No, just needs in general, and it could be expressing any of the needs.
Okay.
Yep.
Will do. So the need that I tend to sort of focus on most, because I work with dogs with reactivity issues, is the need for safety, but also needs for belonging, I think, are really important. I break needs up really into, so the mental, physical, emotional was one category, but in terms of emotional, maybe I would break that up into the need for satisfaction, the need for belonging, and a need for safety. And so you tend to see different behaviors for those. For example, my dog Joey, when he needs it's sort of more a satisfaction and belonging, he'll give this little just like a little moan sort of sound. And we've cultivated that sound by paying attention to it. Basically, whatever, just like any behavior, right? Whatever they show, if it works for them, then they will continue to do more of that. And so you can specifically kind of sculpt behavior rather than like the shrieking bark is the way that they get your attention. It's like the little stuff, like they nose you or whatever it might be. So movement away from things tends to be a really clear microsignal for dogs who are not feeling safe with something. And so you'll see they often will move away, but then go do something else. Like they'll move away and then sniff the ground. And then they'll kind of like look up at the thing that they're afraid of, but it's just like, they like, maybe you have them in heel, and so they're just like shifting a little bit away, or if they're not in heel, they'll be able to move even more away. And I'm a big fan of not having dogs in heel unless they really need to be, so that they have the capacity to move away from things and navigate the scene. And so I'm curious from you folks, what micro signs do you have in your dogs? We have a whole class on microscience, by the way. In case you want more. But Scott?
Yeah, I work with service dogs too, and reactive dogs, all of them actually. Oh, did that disappear on its own? Did my hand disappear? Oh, that's good. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. I thought I had to do that. Okay. Sorry. Shiny thing. What? But another thing I noticed, like when we're walking with dogs, the reactive dogs, how they'll slow down and put you between them and danger, and then as soon as the danger's gone past, like if you're walking across the street, the dog's on one side of the street, you're on the other, and the dog will see it and then slow down, put you, then all of a sudden they'll even, if they're walking on your left side and danger's on your left side, for example, they'll slow down and go around you as their threat comes down the street, and then they'll speed up, go past you, and then go smell and whatnot. But that's one I noticed that people, why are you on my right side? You must be on this. You must. I'm like, nope, your dog just put you in the middle of danger. Your dog just said, Mom, Dad, protect me. You have no choice. And then danger went by. Nobody noticed.
That's
So,
wonderful. Yeah, thank you, Scott. Yeah, I'm reminded of a experience recently where I was, somebody said, my dog likes to bark, which is, I think, never true. I don't know if they enjoy it so much, but they were, they're doing it out of fear. And so she was trying to get past me and her dog, sort of arc around, but she didn't know about arcing. So she was just going straight through. And so the dog was like slow, 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 like it didn't really want to pass by me. So it slowed down and then kind of ducked behind her. And then as soon as she was past me, the dog then sped up again, like, okay, yep, let's get out of here now. And she didn't notice that behavior whatsoever. So yeah, good one to point out. Anyone else? Cindy? We'll have Patty.
So I have a he was I have a very hyperdrive dog. I will go beyond saying he's a high drive dog. I wanted a high drive dog. Now I have a hyperdrive dog, and I've noticed a couple things with him. With a lot of work, he's gotten really good at, instead of what he used to do when he was real young and impulsive, was just out of being, sound asleep, bounce up and start barking at something. And he's gotten really good at just going when he's a little bit uncomfortable. And so he's really toned it down. And that just came from working with him, reassuring him that, Mom's got your back, you're good. I've also, he has a tendency, he wears a head halter, and like, it's not that he minds the head halter, because if nothing's going on, it's not even a thought in his brain. But if he's starting to get excited about something, he will, and this comes from when he was a puppy, he will try and rub the halter off. And even if he's not going to do a reaction to whatever it is, but when his energy and his excitement gets up, he starts rubbing the halter off. And he's learning I recently started using a mobility scooter on my longer days, and he has been learning to get up on the middle of the mobility scooter when he's feeling unsafe. We use that for a number of things, but that's also a place for him to go for safety, because he's literally surrounded by me. In the past, we still do, but we've used metal a lot, where he stands gets between my legs, and as a safety spot. And then so getting up between my legs on the scooter is just another extension of that. And he lets me know when. And I noticed yesterday he was getting really excited about a big white fluffy Great Pyrenees, that came when we were out doing some public access training. And my other dog is a big white fluffy Great Pyrenees. And so he was getting excited because he wanted to go play. And it was very much play. It was very much excitement. You know, the tail was wagging, but it was this, you know, like the inviting wag, not the stiff. It was very much a kind of a fluid thing, like, yeah, and just the happy look on his face. And like, no, you don't get to go play. But it's not, it's really nice to be able to read the difference between I'm terrified and I'm going to bark and get upset versus it's my buddy, I want to go play. And I think that's really, as a handler, especially as a service dog handler, I think it's really important that we know those differences as well, you know, not just when they're upset but when they're giving us signs that, you know, I'm excited for something happy to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the height of the tail matters. The stiffness with which it wags matters. The tail wagging just means there's adrenaline present, but like there's so much to read in terms of that. And you know, if you have a spitz type tail, right, it's all curled, then like this is like a tucked tail versus like if it's normally like this, then this is a tucked tail.
Right. Well, he doesn't have a spitz tail. He's got a poodle tail and it does go up. Normally that's his normal tail carriage. So you just really have to watch how he wags it as much as anything, because the natural carriage is up, and if it's tucked, there's a real problem.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And Patty was next.
Yeah, 1 second, Patty. So I wanted to segue more. So, and one way to determine what our dogs might be feeling is looking at the other dog, because they tend to sort of understand better than our own dogs do, or than we do. Sorry, not than our own dogs do. And looking at the other dog, feeling also though into our own bodies, and to be like, okay, I'm feeling excitement, but you know, which kind of excitement as well, because sometimes we, you know, especially if we've got PTSD or anything like that, we might be sort of biased toward negativity, and being aware in our own bodies of okay, arousal that's not necessarily a bad thing either. And then in terms of the needs that our dogs have, Cindy, you expressed one of the things that they need, which is to be a safe haven. They need us to, and actually Scott mentioned it as well, is like they need us to be a place that they can count on for safety. And so a lot of times we're told to sort of let dogs work things out on their own, or to like, you know, push them into situations that socialize them. And socialization isn't something that is done to a dog. It should be an invitation for them to experience something, and they should always have the capacity to opt out. And observing those small behaviors that they are saying, hey, I'm opting out, is part of what then empowers them to be able to say yes later to things. So yeah, thanks, Cindy. And Patty, go ahead.
Yeah, Micah, he's the one that will bark at just about any noise if he doesn't know what it is, or when we have company and he doesn't know who they are, he barks at them. Just literally comes in my room, which is his safe haven. You know what I mean? My bedroom. And he'll stay in my bedroom because he's scared of the people. So I have to let him, you know, get used to them on his own terms. I tell them just sit down and ignore him. Let him come to you. And eventually he does, you know, but it takes time. So
that makes sense. And yeah, and if there's any way for it to be even easier for him, like I don't know if you have the capacity to like go for go around the block with the people, but if they were first and he was following, that might be even easier.
okay.
Because it's within our homes, there's only so much space that they have to retreat. And so I find that dogs recover from things more quickly. Like if you're trying to work through a reactivity, it'll happen more quickly if they don't get in a place where they're sort of just coping. Like if, you know, so like this is a great chance for him to cope by going into the other room, but he's still probably over threshold even there. And so that going around the block a couple of times, however many times it takes for him to be like, oh, you're one of us, And then going in and then having them still sit down immediately, so that like the same routine that you're doing now is great, but if you had a little warm up first, that might make it even easier. So, and the work that I do, there was a question in here about how can BAT be used to prevent reactivity in service dogs or work with service dogs? So BAT itself is basically, this is for everybody, not just Patty, but BAT itself is it's a strategy basically for creating situations where the dog is comfortable and curiosity can sort of allow them to stretch their comfort zone. So our human, the way we tend to do things is sort of put dogs in the deep end of the pool, and then either like traditionally they might be punished for it, or with positive reinforcement, we might be giving a lot of treats so they can handle it. And what I do, like what BAT introduced to the world, is more doing things at even more of a distance than we can possibly imagine. And then they make faster progress toward comfort, or to getting that reactivity to go away. And like when I first developed BAT 1.0, it was like we were leading the dog to a certain place where they would see the trigger, we wait for them to turn away, and then we would move away. And so giving them some agency, but the human was determining how close they would get. And then 2.0 was really recognizing that, wait a minute, the dogs, there are these micro signals, and if we give them like a longer leash and more chance to like move, they would often choose not to go like directly toward the trigger. And in fact, if they do, that means they've kind of lost their like they're getting a little neurospicy, like they've lost their capacity to go to solve the situation without force. And so basically, if they do walk in a straight line towards something, I kind of slow them down, give them a chance to determine something else they can do, and then we'll follow them around from there. And then 3.0 is adding in this secure attachment. So being more of a paying more attention to what they need, getting reassuring a bit more, doing breathing exercises, because dogs are way attuned to our breathing. And so like the breathing I did at the beginning is called you can call it cyclic breathing, or they also call it the physiological sigh. And research that came out just this year showed that the physiological sigh is, at least among the techniques that they studied, the best, like quickest, most effective way to bring your own nervous system down to relaxation. So Patty, when those people do come into your house, it's a good time to do that physiological sigh so that you're calm. And so the dog's like, okay, Patty's not worried, so maybe I can be a little calmer as well. And so, yeah, and so you're not doing it to calm the dog down. Like, don't think of it as like I'm commanding them to relax, but just like when I relax, my dog is the ground is more stable for my dog, and so I'm going to help provide that for them. And so doing the physiological sigh at other times, so it doesn't become like, oh, mom does this when we're freaked out, becomes another predictor for freak out. But doing it right before you eat is a great time to practice your own physiological sigh, and it tells the dogs that they're off duty as well, and things like that. So weaving that in your day, 5 minutes a day of physiological sighing is supposed to be more, research showed that it was more effective than meditation, either alone or just more effective than other types of breathing. So, but if you have a meditation practice, it's kind of even better. Scott. Thanks, Patty.
I know, like one of Azul's micro signals that took me forever to get. And he can be a little bit iffy both ways. Like most of the time, he's just on the overexcited side, but occasionally he has a little bit of a fear reaction. I know Scott had something he wanted to add, but so Azul's quick micro sign usually is that his nose simply elevates up. Like granted, he's sniffing, but like this dog is always sniffing. His nose is highly trained. He's done set classes with me. He's done man trailing. Has 3 different medical alerts, just very sophisticated nose. So if anything, his very first sign that something in the environment is drastically changing whether it's threat-based or excited-based, is just his nose elevating.
Mm.
And that's a good one that also allows me to then determine how that change in the environment is impacting him emotionally. Because if it's a threat-based, generally his first thing is his nose, after it goes up, is it hits the ground. Because he's wanting to sniff the ground heavily to see what has been around that our immediately area the most. If he is excited, then his head might dart toward me or dart toward a certain direction and stare that way. Or his nose might just stay up in the air and he might do a big inhale. And so knowing the difference between those micro signs for him, like the first one for either way is always the nose just inclining up. But then which direction it goes from there really tells me his emotional state that goes with that, whatever he's seeing, sniffing in the environment.
Mhm.
And so, Scott, I know you had something you wanted to add too.
No, that's great. And it goes along with this too. Grisha, you know where the research came from for the double inhale and the sharp double inhale and the exhale?
Mhm. Oh,
Came from dogs.
well, I just read the study. Yeah.
It came from dogs.
Mm.
They noticed it with dogs first, and they started to realize we do it.
Mm.
So the dogs would do it when they go to lay down, they go to bed, or after a big stressor. The double sharp inhale. So it was like when you were doing it, I was like, yep.
Mm.
There is if anybody wants to see it, Andrew Huberman talks about it about a year ago with his big bulldog, his massive bulldog. Rest in peace for that one. But that's where the research studies really started to focus on, was because the dogs, they noticed it in the dogs. And they go, oh, we do it too.
Fascinating. I did not know that started with dogs. That's cool.
Yeah. It tripped. I'll finish this real quick, but it tripped when Professor Andrew Huberman noticed it, he just kept going, what? And so it always stayed like a little piece of his mind, because he also deals with breathing exercises and Wim Hof method and the other stuff that goes with all of Stanford research studies he's part of. And it just always became a piece of his mind that he noticed it so much more. And he had to bring it to the people. And he goes, help me figure this out. And I'm like, oh, well, it actually, and then welcome to. So it was great to see it applied. And like you said, don't just do it when you're stressed. It's the hardest time to do it, but when you're going to settle down. But you notice it's the exact same times that the dogs will do it too.
Mm-hmm. I remember when my dog Spoon was a puppy. Let's see. So I got her in 2001. I remember when she was an adolescent. I didn't get her as a puppy, but and she was like not settling down at night. And I'm just like, what do I do? And then I noticed that sometimes when she did settle down, right, she did it like, and so I started doing that for her. And then when Peanut came along, I did the side to tell him like it's bedtime. Yeah, so that's cool. I didn't know that research was started with dogs.
Yeah, it's the inhale and then a sharp. So you inhale it and then you do another sharp intake.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
helps
You
reset
inhale,
your
expand.
parasympathetic. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
the big exhale. Like a lot of people are focused on the exhale, and it's like you got to get the oxygen to replace the carbon dioxide. You got to have that. And then it's when we notice dogs smelling, it's while they're always increasing, then to decrease.
Mm-hmm.
So they do quicks and then the quicks and then the bigs.
Right. And their nose, I mean, they're physiologically different from us in terms of like where the air goes and stuff. And so it's not quite the same, but yeah, like what you said about the carbon dioxide, right? That's having too much carbon dioxide is what tells us to breathe more. And so if we can get that in balance, then the whole system is like, oh, we can calm down. And we want something, I think it was like less than 6 breaths per minute or whatever is kind of the tipping point for calming down as well. And so the long exhale then helps with that as well. But yeah, so this was more effective than the like Wim Hof kind of hyperventilation as well, which makes sense because hyperventilation feels weird. And this feels natural. And so, yeah. Other Penny, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I know we are on a time crunch, then I'm sure there's a bunch more micro signals out there. I don't want to stop anybody, but just kind of moving it along, like anyone in the training world, and I'm sure most of us here have heard the phrase before that needs drive behavior, emotions drive behavior. You know, emotions and needs both kind of work hand in hand, because I feel it's generally the emotional need that we often neglect to try to figure out in our dogs. Me personally too, the same way, finger pointed back at me. It's the last thing we usually consider. I'll just put it that way. But so when the dog's needs are driving their behavior, we know that that can help. That's where we see a lot of our big behaviors and emotional outbursts, but also those smaller behaviors of dogs raiding the trash. I mean, yeah, they could just be after something yummy there, but dogs also tend to do that maybe when their mental stimulation needs were not being met or their social needs were not being met and things like that. So just kind of a little bit on, I don't know, have you noticed any specific behaviors that you see? And I mean, Scott and other people can join in. It doesn't have to be a one-sided conversation, but behaviors that you've noticed that go with a specific, whether it be physical, mental, or emotional need that your dog has. And, you know, I can kind of start that out with, like, Azul generally is not a clingy dog. He doesn't like, he's the husky that hates to be over warm. So he wants to be outside and alone. And so if he is clingy, that usually means that he has an upset stomach, which is a physical need for him. Unfortunately, it's a common one for him that we've figured out a lot, and it can, you know, we've made great headway. But so I know that, and also he can, whether it's the upset stomach that drives the fact that he's feeling like I've spent too much time with other dogs, you know, being a dog trainer, or whether it's the fact that, you know, whether it's physical driving the emotional driving the physical, you know, it's just hard to say. So I guess that's kind of where my gear point is. Like, have you noticed anything, not necessarily in Azul's case, but like, yeah, when we see a dog doing this behavior, it's generally an emotional need or a physical need or, you know, anything like that.
Good question. So there's a lot that came up for me that I wanted to share, but I'll answer that last piece first before I forget. So for example, like biting at the leash tends to be like there's too much arousal in the system. So the dog needs to have something that calms them down. And so us doing a breathing exercise is good, moving to a place where they can go sniff instead of, you know, just walking on straight cement. So doing some enrichment at that time, or going into something that's more relational, like a training exercise, like targeting your hand or something else. But recognizing that as like, it's not just a behavior, it's a dog saying like, wow, like I'm spinning right now, emotionally. And so one thing in terms of feelings and emotions, so like feelings are like a physiological experience, and then emotions are kind of the mental construct we have with those. And so we don't know if dogs have the same emotions that we have. Different individuals will have different emotions based on the feelings that they're somatically experiencing. But, you know, we have enough of the same nervous system and the same emotional system that it's probably something like what we're experiencing. And I always just see it as like, okay, here's a time to experiment with what is the dog missing. So for example, I did some seminars in Europe or in the UK recently, and I haven't traveled yet really since we got Joey because of COVID and all that. And also I just choose not to travel very much for seminars anymore. Doing all the online is really nice for me. And so we had a dog sitter who was like, we work from home. And so the dog sitter was off working during the day, and she didn't walk the dogs at the beginning, which we only noticed because Joey jumped up on the washing machine and ate her bra, and then she had to take him to the vet, which incidentally was her very first bra, because she's transgender and she's so happy to have a bra, and then the dog destroyed it. So I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Anyway, but we rabbit hole down to okay, why is Joey chewing again? Because he hasn't been destroying things, right? He's 2.5. He's kind of done with that phase. Well, he's done with it because he's got a life that's satisfying for him. He's not feeling like he's missing us, and he's getting enough exercise. And so that quality time that she was giving him in the morning either met his emotional need, so he stopped chewing, or his physical exercise need, or kind of both. And like you said, Penny, pain is a huge one that we don't often notice. So for example, if dogs are really mouthy all of a sudden, it may not be just that they're bored, but they have gastrointestinal upset. And so that's something to be looking into as well. So other folks or comments on that?
I know that was kind of exactly where I was hoping you'd go with that. Go ahead, Scott. I'll let you comment.
You're muted,
You can
Scott.
go. Yeah, so one that I always learned with my dogs, and it kind of has to go with walking, is if they don't want to go with you, it's not always, it's your dogs, you try to take them out. You're like, okay, we got to go out. I've got to go do something, and I need you to go do this and this and this. And they kind of refuse. They'll go outside with you, but then kind of, and this is not for the reactivity or nervousness where dogs are overly excited to go outside. It's they're happy to go with you, but then they go and lay down. And you're like, oh, we have conflicting emotional states right now. I'm stimulated, aroused, whatever, and you're trying to be calm. Great. Well, it's usually them needing social support, them actually needing you to take the time with them, and then slowly petting and interacting that way. And then they go, okay, cool, because of endogenous opioids and oxytocin, and they feel safe enough that they can go do their thing and with you. And you go, cool, at least you're not so excited. And then, okay, we met that social need. And yes, which of course is going to affect you because it releases it with you too. And then you start to go, okay, and then you can start breathing, noticing your breath, noticing your presence where you're at. And then, okay. And then the dog will do what it needs to do, what you need them to do. At this point, it's not even what they need to do. It's what you need them to do, supposedly, so you can go on with what you need to do. And then it helps you feel better. So when you go to do other things that you need to do, you're not as high strung. But yeah, it goes back to when a dog doesn't want to go take care of their physical needs, but they're not trying to go do anything else. It's usually that emotion, that need for reconnection, or just to get you to connect, is one that I see a lot too, where dogs are just like, yeah, no. And they don't not making the eye contact. They're just enough. They're just within your eyesight. They're not trying to go out of the way. They're not trying to run ahead. They're not trying to be over anything else. And you're just like, which then could also lead to other issues. But could also lead to, with you were saying, Penny, when your dog needs to be clingy or starts to be clingy, you start to notice more of those things. Oh, now they're coming to me a little bit more than they used to. Maybe it's time to see a vet. So I'll stop there.
Oh, and I can totally, exactly, you described Azul's morning routine to a T. So we have a fenced in backyard. I wake up whenever he wakes me up, which if I'm lucky is around 7:30 in the morning. Some mornings it's 6:30 in the morning. But when it's that early time frame and he wakes me up early, my first thought is, oh, he needs to go potty. I can quickly get him out the door, put him in the backyard, which is fenced, and go back in the house. And if I do that, the first thing he does is go about 20 feet into the backyard and lays down and stares at the door. Because it's not that he needs that, like, he does need to pee, but it's that social connection that he's after in that moment. And most mornings, the routine is, all right, I'm awake. I know he's not in a hurry. So I use the bathroom first and take care of my basic needs that I have to do right away. And then we go out in the backyard together. And I wander the yard while he sniffs everything that came in the backyard overnight. And as long as I stay standing and moving in the yard, that's all the connection he wants with me. But the moment I step out of the yard, he lays down wherever he's at, waiting for me to return back to his yard. Because it's no fun, his social needs aren't being met in that yard alone. And while he would rather be in that yard alone versus go back inside the house on those moments because he loves morning, he still would rather me be in the backyard with him. So it's kind of that catch of meeting everybody's needs. So I've learned that no matter how early he wakes me up, just take care of my basic needs first, because he can wait a minute. He will actually whine and wake me up in a different way if he has to rush out to the bathroom. Say he does have a physical issue going on. But quite generally, I need to take care of myself, get my drink, use the bathroom, put on my winter gear now, which takes a little bit longer, and just be prepared to stay out in the backyard for 30 to 45 minutes because that's all he wants. And for as much as he does for me as a service dog, I should at least be willing to give him that. I swear I give him a lot more, but that's how we start our almost every day. If it's at all in my power, that's how we start our day, because that's what makes him the happiest. And so if we want to just switch gears really quickly, unless Grisha has something she wants to add there, because I saw, go ahead.
I do. Thank you, Penny. So I think you brought up a really, really good point about the balancing of needs, right? Because you have needs, the dog has needs. And sometimes when we start tracking our dogs and their needs, we lose track of our own. And so it's sort of like, well, the dog's needs are more important than mine. And if we're putting them in situations that we choose them to be in, obviously their needs are going to take top priority because they don't have an opportunity to get out without us. So that does make it higher. And making sure that, like you did, like your morning routine is really important. You can't just like, oh, I'm going to run outside and be with him for 45 minutes and freeze, right? You prepared yourself so that you had the capacity to do that. And if, for example, sorry, rewind. Also, that's really good for you to be outside, right? The fresh air is an excellent way to wake up. It's really good for our mental health. It's good for all kinds of things. And if there was a time when you couldn't, right? If maybe physically you can't make it into your yard based on whatever your situation is. Fun fact, if you throw a handful of treats in the yard, they will at least go do their business more out there. So my dog, at least, like when I first got her, Zuki was like, it is freezing out there. I am not going out, if it's raining or it's cold in some way. She's like, yeah, I'll just use indoor potty, which we don't actually have. It's the carpet. So we just throw a handful of treats out. And so she'll, scavenge and then do her business. But I love the solution you have, Penny. That's really tracking both sides of that.
Well, and that's what I was going to lead into, is tracking. But so for Azul, like, food is the last thing he usually wants in that moment. But I've also noticed that that's also when he tends to have his upset stomach the most. So like on my way to grabbing my coat and everything, I'll grab 3 or 4 of his treats that are more, the cheaper treats that are going to take care of the stomach bile that's in his stomach. And then as I'm wandering, I have to pretend to bury him so that he finds them on his own, because if I give them to him, he's not going to eat them. But if he can find them on his own, then he will usually grab them, go hide them elsewhere, but eventually circle back and eat them. And thankfully, in this fenced-in backyard, I have 2 sheds that at least allow me to hide from the wind, rain, elements if need be. But yeah, he needs me out there regardless. So even if I can't move, on my worst of days, I can take a chair and sit in the shed and still be with him, where he can go take care of his needs and come back and check on me, and go take care of his needs, come back and check on me. So touching on the tracking, because that's kind of where I was going to lead you before. I've always called it, like I've said for years and years, that we need to dance with our dogs. And then you did this tracking webinar that just totally blew my mind. And so let's first clarify that tracking is not like tracking another human being as far as like man trailing, which is a form of tracking, but we're talking totally different. And your tracking is the dance that I've referred to for years. So go ahead and explain that a little bit for people.
Sure. So yeah, so tracking is the concept of attuning to, or you're paying attention to the needs of the animal, the desires that they have, whatever it is, and in a continual sense, versus just like checking in with them or attuning to them in the moment. You're continually keeping some thread of awareness on your dog, just as you might keep some thread of awareness on your own body and your physical needs. The dog, especially if you're a service dog handler, is an extension of you and your capacity, but it's also obviously their own individual being. And just as you might accept that, in this moment, I don't have the energy to do XYZ, or my foot hurts too much to do XYZ. It's the dog is not physically, emotionally, mentally going to be served by doing this activity, right? So there are limitations on your own capacity as a team based on what the dog can handle right now. And that's true for pet dogs. It's true for service dogs as well. And we lean on them, or weaving. So actually you, folks who have service dogs, you're relying on your dog, but to recognize that they're not a cane, they're not a walker, they are a being with needs. And so recognizing that there are just times that, just as you might not have spoons, the dog doesn't have spoons right now to do a particular activity, and finding ways to resource them. And so the webinar itself is a keynote presentation I did in the UK, and then did it live. And then so that's restreamed, and then with Q&A. So that was something we just did recently.
And so I know we didn't see a whole lot of questions come through on the chat.
There's two.
I have a feeling we're going to have a few questions on tracking as the topic as a whole, or, that whole idea of paying attention to your dog so that they can pay attention to you, which is what we service dog handlers need, is our dogs to pay attention to us, whether they're doing medical alerts at home or working in a public environment where they got to pay attention to the way that we're moving. We need them to pay attention to us. And so we need to also then pay attention to them. And that I loved the whole dance you did where, you connected at the elbows and kind of just moved together, you and your husband.
An actual dance that was in the video.
Yeah, that was in the video, an actual dance. And that is a perfect picture of exactly what I want for me and my service dog, and for all of those that I work with and train with, for human and dog, that being able to, with just a slight movement, know what the other one needs. A slight. And, I have all these people tell me, well, my dog knows this number of cues or commands, whatever it is they call them. Or do you use a different cue for this side versus that side? It's like, well, I did once upon a time, but now my dog just knows those behaviors and they do them on their own. And so I don't cue it. Once in a blue moon, I might cue something like, so his go find daddy task is basically a forward momentum pull when I'm struggling. And if dad is out in the store with us or another family member, he knows them all by name, and I'll tell Azul to go find them. So if he's actually pulling me through a store, he looks very much like an untrained dog in that moment, because he is literally dragging me through the store. But so for that particular one, I might cue it more frequently, but it's not because he needs the cue. It's because I want everyone around to hear me telling him how good of a job he's doing so that they realize it is a trained behavior and not an untrained behavior. But I very rarely give cues to my dogs anymore, not intentionally. You know, we do all these unintentional, maybe started with some hand signals, but like my whole body is a giant cue to my service dog. I don't have to give him words most of the time because he knows those body movements. And that's because we've spent 3.5 years developing our dance. We know what we're doing together. We can take care of each other. And it's that give and take. And so, does anybody else have any questions, whether it's about tracking or needs in general that we've discussed? Or is there anybody specifically struggling with something, like trying to figure out what their dog's micro signals are or anything like that?
And it looks like there are a couple of questions in the chat, which I could address as well.
Go for it.
Okay. And one thing also, Penny, the word tracking, the reason, and to everybody, the reason that I like this as a word, so I borrowed it from Aaron Johnson, who's a social justice advocate. But basically to have it be a word that's just like, are you tracking your dog versus like, are you paying attention to your dog? Like you can sort of stretch it out, but like having it be fast makes it something I can use around the house. Like with my husband, I can say, oh, good job tracking Suki. Like, because what he wasn't doing was like, or what he was doing was just like walking through spaces in which she was, and like they have their own body bubble, right? But by tracking our dogs, we're paying attention, like where are they physically in space for one thing, and do they need us to go around, or are they able to sort of dance around with us as we move, or am I going to be like entering their body bubble sort of forcefully versus, you know, tracking them. So that's an example of, I like that word. Or why I like that word. Michelle says, I'm working with guide dog puppies who are only allowed to relieve on cue. Can you address the conflict between the need for adolescent males to mark and the requirement these dogs relieve only on cue? So, right. So I want to sort of tease apart needs and strategies. So needs are sort of fundamental biological needs. Strategies are ways to express those, ways to make those needs be met. So it's it's attempts to meet those needs. So it's behavior. And so they may not necessarily have a need to mark on everything. They have a need to feel like they belong, like they're safe. And marking is one way to make that happen. And it's a very sort of pre-programmed strategy, but I don't feel like they have to mark on everything. When dogs are, when they're feeling more in their element and more calm, they don't tend to mark as much. And yeah, it's kind of, we are sort of taking sort of withdrawal from their need, or from their, not trust account so much as their capacity to meet their own needs when we tell them to, you know, when to pee on cue. We've taken away some of their agency. So making sure that they have agency in other aspects, because they do, like, agency is a major need. So I tend, much like Penny, I don't have a lot of cues for my dogs. I'm really almost not a dog trainer anymore. I'm just like, I live with dogs, and I teach them to track us, and I teach us to track them. So it's this mutual paying attention. All right, Joey asks, can you differentiate between off duty and on duty with the context of working harness and out of harness and off leash? And so this, I would say, is more like, for the folks in here, I'd like to hear more about that. I can give my opinion, but I'm not a service dog trainer. I work with service dog trainers, but I'm not a service dog trainer. So
I can do a rough overview of the basic concept. So some handlers, and I don't train this way, but some handlers believe that we know that our dogs need off-duty time. They definitely need time to be a dog. So some handlers believe that it's easier for a dog to stay on focus when they're given a specific cue, like wear a specific harness to show that they are on duty right now, and that you expect a certain level of focus, and so that they're not allowed to go socialize with other dogs or other people or other things wearing that gear. And then when they can do their dog related behaviors or socialize or, go dig the hole in the ground or whatever, that you take that gear off and you may replace it with a different set of gear that's called their play gear or whatever. Or you may, leave gear off in general. So that's the basic concept of it. And I understand it works really, really well for a lot of people. My take on it personally is that, so Azul's first and foremost top priority responsibility to me is medical alerts. He's going to do those basically 24/7. If he's anywhere near me, he's going to give that alert no matter what gear he's wearing anytime. Do I expect him to? No, I mean, there's the occasion where he's sleeping, whatever. But I've had service dogs literally stop playing a game of ball, which was their top thing, asked to come inside when a family member had that dog out playing ball, asked to come inside, come do the medical alert, and be very insistent when I tried to ignore the medical alert to make sure that need was taken care of. They will go out of their way once they know the alert, and I have faith in that. So yes, Azul has stopped playing with his buddies, even though that is probably one of his top joys in this world, is playing with his friends, and he totally will stop playing with his friends. Now, if he does it and he misses it, thankfully, that's not going to mean like I'm going to die. But I can't remember the last time he missed an alert for that. There was a little bit of a struggle where he missed a few alerts when I first opened the training center, because sometimes he's in the office behind a closed door and he hadn't learned yet how to do the alert when he wasn't at my side. Now he's got a very specific, very low volume bark that he does. He does one, like to tell on his sister we had for a while. The other dog, if she was being naughty, he would do one bark for her and a different bark for the medical alerts. So he's always figured out a way to get my attention to do a medical alert anywhere he was. So that's why I don't specifically train the working gear versus the non-working gear, because it's all working gear to me, but that's the philosophy behind it. Is so maybe the dog is walking out in front when you're walking on an exercise harness in the neighborhood, but you put on the work harness and go into a store and the dog knows that they have to heel the whole time.
That makes sense. And I love the whole background of that. And I think that, like, if the dog, even if they are wearing working gear, I think the one hazard of that for the human is to sort of think, oh, when this is on, he has to do exactly as I say. Like, so you're always going to be tracking your dog, whatever gear they're wearing. It's still important to be paying attention to their needs. It may be that, like, the balance is sort of shifted to say, hey, you're kind of like, you're going to be paid more heavily for this task right now, if you are wearing this certain vest, and it's also more important. But I think it's key to remember you still have a living being, and I know most people are aware of that, but a lot of folks in the sort of more traditional service dog training world are not attuning to that. So, Cindy.
There we go. I was just going to say that I think the being in working gear and being at work versus not being in working gear and being at work is probably most applicable to guide dogs, because they're going to have a much harder time guiding without their harness on. There's reasons that guide dog programs tell you to take their capes or vests off when you're puppy walking, if they have to urinate or if they have to eliminate it for any reason, because once those dogs are trained, they put that harness on, it means they're going to go to work. And that's what they predominantly do for working. Whereas my dog does a lot, he's a mobility, technically he's mostly a mobility dog. He does a lot of retrieving, and he does some moment pulls and a few other things. and a few other tasks. Most of the time when I ask him for a task, he is not wearing working gear. I don't have him doing medical alerts at this point, but I do, I will ask him to pick something up. If I want him to pick something up, I don't want to have to go grab a cape or a harness or a leash or something to tell him, hey, now you're working. And I want to be able to say, hey, can you come pick this up, and let him go back to play or sleep or whatever he's doing. Because I will also tell him, I will also give him a relief cue when he's in harness. And again, not everybody will do that when they're in a working harness, but I expect him to wait for that cue when we're, I don't want him relieving in my house or somebody else's house. It's something that it needs to be on cue unless he's off leash. And I think that's just polite dog etiquette, not just service dog etiquette. But I think it's much more important to teach on and off duty gear if you're working with a guide dog, where the handler's not necessarily going to see if they just lift their leg on something once they're trained. You want them to have very specific when their behavior in gear versus a lot of other types of service dogs.
I like Joey's point there that she wants her dog, to be all of itself all the time. And so just to kind of dovetail that in what Michael was saying as well about some reactivity, it's like, yes, we want our dogs to be free to be themselves. I would dare say in nearly every situation. Because we all know that exception of there may be hazards in a certain environment or situation that we don't know of, such as a road. So when I walk Azul, he's generally on at least a 15-foot long line, if not longer, sometimes up to 50 feet. But when we cross a road, he still needs to be in heel when we cross the road. Basic safety, and he knows this now. So, I don't specifically cue him to heel most of the time, although I may say, hey, you need to back up here a minute. But it's more of I want them to be themselves, if at all themselves. What they want to do naturally is safe for everybody involved. And so that kind of gets into Michael's trouble or his issue. So he works in retail. He's a greeter at a very busy store. So people are coming and going all the time, and other people bringing dogs into the store as well. And so his dog gets excited and wants to go see them, but he can't allow that in that particular moment in that situation. And he needs to turn her away, and he'll practice some obedience skills with her until the other dog passes. And I take that same approach. So while I want my dog to be social and have his social time, I'm not letting him be social with dogs that I don't know. If I don't know the other dog, I don't know that interaction is going to go okay. Because as anyone who is a service dog handler in this group knows, there are a lot of untrained or undertrained pets in public places. And that's a huge hazard. I'm not willing to allow my dog to accept that risk. Now, generally, he's quite good at reading body language, and he's quite good at making that judgment call for himself, with the exception of some younger adolescents that he just thinks are always going to be a threat to him because he doesn't like that higher energy of, those 16 to 20-month-old adolescents, especially males. But other than that, he generally can read the situation well. And so I can trust him to make the determination now. But there was a time where Azul was in that ballpark of, 14 to 20-month-old adolescent, where he would easily rush right in to greet any dog anytime. And my ability to recall him off of that was lacking because his desire to go see that dog was too strong. So hence the long lines everywhere we went, because I don't want, like, I've had reactive dogs in the past, like severely fearful reactive dogs. And I never want to be that person that allows my dog to rush up to another dog. And so if body language is happy all around, I have no problem with my dogs greeting other dogs when we're not in a public place that's not not a pet friendly public place. But so sometimes I think we do have to redirect our dogs a little bit in when we're thinking safety for all, whether it's redirect from crossing a road on their own, or whether it's redirect from engaging with a dog that it's not the right situation for them to be engaging with, whatever that is. I think that's an important skill. Joey, I see that you have your hand up. You're muted still, so you'll have to make sure you unmute.
That's what I was working on.
Awesome.
Yeah, so with my dog, he's not a service dog. He's just my lovely boy. But I have pretty much every day have a service dog guest dog with me for board and trains. It's pretty, especially this time of year, it's pretty much all the time. And for my reading his micro signals, one of the things I really focus on is, when does he need a break from the social of having a guest dog? He is brilliant at working and living with other dogs of all ages and sizes, and from the ridiculous adolescents to older dogs. He's absolutely amazing. But I really watch his tiny little signals that says, I need a break. I think that's really important, because a lot of people focus on giving their dogs social interactions with other dogs, which is very necessary. But sometimes that's not something they're wanting or feel up to at the moment. So for him especially, I definitely spend or really pay attention to, what does he need? When does he need time outside with just he and I, or time even in the house where the other dogs are confined, so that he can use his space as he would like to, without the pressure of where other dogs are at and what they're doing.
I totally love that, Joey. Just before you finish us off, Grisha. So I totally love that. And like you guys heard me I had to step away to go see Azul for a moment. So the dog that I currently have in my training center, Blue, is an adolescent in the age frame that Azul doesn't like. So they stay separated by a baby gate, and they're usually very comfortable with each other in that space. But Blue had actually crawled under a chair and was nose to nose with the baby gate, and Azul was laying just inches away from the gate. Well, Azul knows I'm on Zoom. He tries his hardest to be as quiet as possible, and he just accepted it, although other times he may have done a little growl and get back out of my space kind of thing. But so he accepted it. So when I called Blue away, he had to do that bark, that mini little bark, and all that meant was, Mom, I need you to come in here and give me a hug. That's all he wanted. So I could hear the Zoom the whole time. I stepped on the other side of the gate, gave him his hug, his embrace, his love. And that was all he needed. He needed that moment, because what Blue had done was stressful enough for him that he just needed that connection. And so I do think, especially those of us that do have other dogs come and go into our home or training center or whatever, that we really recognize that with our dogs that are full-time members in that home, and when they just need us. So I'm glad to hear you say that, Joey. So thank you very much. So, all right, Grisha, we are actually out of time. So finishing thoughts on whatever you think is most important.
Well, I don't know if this is the absolute most important, but something that came up for me while you were talking in that last section was, I love Joey's point of observing our own dogs to see when have they had enough of something, in particular, like those little small movements. And think one thing that can really help is for us to practice that in ourselves. So if you have a partner or someone who's routinely in your life, I've found this practice to be really useful. So in my house, we do this hand signal when we're not in a space where we can language. So this is like, I need a little, like a timeout from our social interaction right now. And so if I do this or my husband does this, it means we need sanctuary. And then until we disengage from that sanctuary, or until we officially end it, we just don't talk to each other or interact in any particular way. And so at the end, when we're ready, we sort of like invite, like, can we language now? And the other person can say yes, like let's end sanctuary. And I find that really helpful. And I find it also helps him he's now learned to attune to, like, when is the dog done with an interaction, like watching, being able to track that better, and having experienced it ourselves, we can then extend that to other beings too. So I think I'll leave us with that. Thank you, Penny.
That is totally awesome. I want to thank everybody for being here. I know there's some faces that, like, names I've seen elsewhere but aren't typically here. So I just want to remind everybody, and I put this in the chat, but put the recording of this in our Working Paws group. For those of you who are in the C2C Working Paws group, that's the Crazy2Calm, our kind of little group. If you're not in that group and you want the link, and I'll make sure Grisha has it as well, but you can simply email me at youperpaws@gmail.com and I'll be sure to send you the link. It is actually on the Crazy2Calm YouTube channel is where it'll get posted, and it's open source to anybody, so you can share it to any other service dog handlers that you know or work with, because the more that watch it, the better. That's my philosophy. Go ahead, Grisha.
That sounds excellent. I love the open source. So I just realized I should plug a webinar that's coming up next year oh gosh, Danielle Beck and another person that I've now just forgotten their name will be presenting, but it will be modifications on basic training and more advanced training for folks with disabilities. And so I think that would be something that might be of interest here. And so, yeah, that's all.
Awesome. As soon as I see that actually come out, I will get that shared in the Working Paws group as well.
Thanks
so
so
all
much.
my people will see it.
Cool. Thanks,
All
Penny.
right. So with that, everybody have a great afternoon,